try to avoid that, but I think it's unavoidable.
You know, I can't do this forever. I've been doing it since I was 21. As you move into your 80s, you say, hey, that's enough.
Before his passing, legendary actor Robert Redford shocked Hollywood by finally breaking his lifelong silence about the mysterious death of Natalie Wood, one of the most tragic and enduring mysteries in the entertainment world. For decades, whispers surrounded the night she vanished from the yacht Splendor in 1981, a night shared with her husband Robert Wagner and fellow actor Christopher Walken. While official reports called it an accidental drowning, Redford's final words painted a far darker, more emotional picture of what might have truly happened. Redford and Wood shared a special bond that began during their early careers, their chemistry both on and off screen undeniable. She trusted him deeply, and in his later years, Redford claimed that Natalie had confided in him things she never told anyone else, about fear, jealousy, and secrets she couldn't bear to keep. What Redford finally admitted just before his death didn't just reopen old wounds, it reignited questions about who Natalie really was, and whether her death was ever meant to be understood. In his final reflections, Redford described a night filled with tension, voices raised, and a woman desperate to escape a situation spiraling out of control. His haunting revelation was part confession, part warning, and it may have changed how Hollywood remembers both Natalie Wood and the people closest to her forever. Long before her tragic death became one of Hollywood's darkest mysteries, Natalie Wood was already living in the shadow of her own fears. Born Natalia Nikolaevna Zakharenko in 1938, she was thrust into the spotlight almost before she could walk. By age 5, she was appearing in films. By 16, she was a star. And by her early 20s, she was one of the most recognizable faces in America. A symbol of beauty, fragility, and quiet strength. But behind that radiant smile, Natalie carried a lifetime of anxiety. Her mother, Maria, was obsessed with fame and control. She pushed Natalie relentlessly, whispering that stardom was both a gift and a curse. "You can be loved today," her mother once told her, "and forgotten tomorrow." Those words would haunt Natalie for the rest of her life. As she matured, Natalie became one of the few child stars who successfully transitioned into adult fame. Roles in Rebel Without a Cause, Splendor in the Grass, and West Side Story cemented her legacy. Yet success never silenced her insecurities. Friends said she was terrified of dark water, an eerie detail that would later feel like a prophecy. She once told a confidant that she had recurring dreams of drowning, dreams so vivid she would wake up screaming. Her relationships mirrored her inner turmoil. When she fell in love with actor Robert Wagner, Hollywood hailed them as the golden couple. They first married in 1957, when she was just 19 and he was 26. But beneath the glamorous photos and magazine covers, cracks were forming. Wagner's jealousy and Natalie's need for independence often clashed. They divorced in 1962, only to remarry years later, a decision that many of Natalie's friends quietly questioned. By the late 1970s, Natalie was trying to rebuild her life and career. She had 2 daughters, Natasha and Courtney, and was once again in demand on screen. But those who knew her best sensed that she was growing tired, emotionally and spiritually. She confided to close friends that she often felt trapped, both by her fame and by the expectations surrounding her. "People think I have everything," she once said, "but they don't see how lonely this can be." That loneliness followed her into every film set, every Hollywood party, every interview where she was asked about her perfect life. It was during this period that she reconnected with Robert Redford. The two had first worked together in Inside Daisy Clover, 1965, and their on-screen chemistry was undeniable. What few people knew was that off-screen a deep trust formed between them, one based not on romance, but understanding. Redford admired her professionalism, but more than that, he saw the sadness behind her smile. In later years, Redford would describe Natalie as a soul who carried too much light for the world she was in. He noticed how she was drawn to complicated people and situations, as if she subconsciously sought chaos to feel alive. Natalie herself admitted she couldn't escape drama. "I'm drawn to danger," she told an interviewer in 1979. "Maybe because it makes me feel something real." By 1981, that sense of danger became tragically real. Natalie, Robert Wagner, and actor Christopher Walken planned a weekend trip aboard Wagner's yacht, Splendor. It was supposed to be a relaxing getaway, but it became one of the most infamous nights in Hollywood history. In the days leading up to the trip, Natalie confided to one of her friends that she felt uneasy. The friend later told police that Natalie seemed distracted, even afraid. She mentioned tension between the men on board and fears that arguments could turn heated. Still she went. She wanted peace, Redford would later say, but she always seemed to end up in storms. When news broke that Natalie Wood had drowned off Catalina Island, the world was stunned. The official report called it an accident, but even then, questions swirled. How did a woman terrified of water end up alone in the dark ocean? Why were there conflicting accounts of what happened on that yacht? And why did so many who knew her, including Robert Redford, remain silent for so long? Natalie's funeral drew hundreds of mourners, stars, directors, and ordinary fans who felt like they had lost a piece of Hollywood's golden heart. But for Robert Redford, her death was more than a tragedy. It was the closing of a chapter he could never forget. He carried the weight of that night for decades, saying little, always respectful of the pain it caused. It wouldn't be until near the end of his own life that Redford would finally rev. When Natalie Wood first met Robert Redford in the early 1960s, she was already a major star, radiant, complex, and endlessly captivating. Redford, on the other hand, was an up-and-coming actor trying to find his place in Hollywood. They were cast together in Inside Daisy Clover, 1965, a film about a teenage starlet who's destroyed by fame. For both of them, the story hit a little too close to home. From their very first scene together, the chemistry was undeniable. But while the cameras captured a spark of romance, behind the scenes, something far deeper developed. A friendship built on honesty and empathy. Natalie admired Redford's quiet strength, his unwillingness to get lost in Hollywood's chaos. He respected her resilience, her ability to remain kind despite living under constant scrutiny. Redford would later say that Natalie was the most genuine person in a world full of masks. She could be emotional and impulsive, but never false. He saw in her someone who longed for freedom, not just from the spotlight, but from the ghosts of her own life. They spent long hours on set talking about their childhoods, their fears, and the strange loneliness that comes with fame. Natalie once confessed to Redford that she often felt like she was performing even when the cameras weren't rolling. He told her he understood. That fame could become a kind of prison. From that moment, a bond formed that would last for decades. Though rumors sometimes hinted at romance between them, their connection was never romantic in the traditional sense. It was deeper, a kind of unspoken trust that transcended attraction. Redford often described her as a sister in spirit, someone who understood the cost of being loved by the world but never truly known by it. After Inside Daisy Clover, they reunited in This Property is Condemned, 1966, where their on-screen chemistry once again drew attention. But away from the spotlight, both were navigating turbulent personal lives. Natalie's marriage to Robert Wagner had already collapsed once, and her second marriage, to producer Richard Gregson, ended in heartbreak after his infidelity. Redford, meanwhile, was quietly coping with personal loss, including the death of his infant son years earlier. These shared wounds deepened their understanding of each other. Friends of both actors recalled how they could talk for hours about life, loss, and what it meant to live under public scrutiny. Redford often said Natalie reminded him of someone who wanted to breathe underwater, desperate to find peace in the one place she feared the most. In later years, as both became icons of Hollywood, they stayed in touch even when projects took them apart. Redford respected her for choosing family over fame when she stepped away from acting in the 1970s. He admired how she tried to live a normal life, even as paparazzi followed her every move. Natalie, in turn, confided in him about her struggles with Robert Wagner, the jealousy, the mistrust, and the quiet tension that often existed beneath the surface of their marriage. She told me she loved him, Redford once recalled in an interview years later. But she also said she was afraid of where that love might lead. That fear lingered. In the months before her death, Natalie reached out to Redford again. They met privately in Los Angeles, and according to one of Redford's biographers, it was a deeply emotional conversation. She told him she felt trapped between the life everyone expects and the truth I can't speak. Redford didn't press her for details, but he later said that her eyes held something broken, something final. When news of her death broke, Redford was devastated. He reportedly secluded himself for days, unable to process the shock. To those close to him, he admitted he couldn't stop thinking about their last meeting, the fear in her voice, the sadness she tried to hide. "I think she knew something was coming," he said quietly. Over the years, Redford refused to publicly speculate about what. Natalie had been hesitant to go. Friends later said she mentioned bad feelings about the trip. She didn't like the ocean, and she was exhausted from filming. But Wagner insisted, and Natalie agreed, hoping it would be a chance to relax. She brought along champagne, fine wine, and her famous charm, trying to keep the peace in what was already a fragile marriage. At first, the evening seemed ordinary. The group dined on the yacht, laughing and sharing stories. But beneath the surface, jealousy simmered. Walken, younger and charismatic, had developed a strong friendship with Natalie during filming. Wagner didn't like it. The more they drank, the clearer the tension became. According to Captain Davern, voices began to rise. What started as teasing turned into argument, Wagner accusing Walken of getting too close to his wife, Walken trying to defuse the situation, and Natalie caught in the middle. Around 10 p.m., the laughter was gone. There was shouting, then silence. No one knows exactly what happened next. The official record states that Natalie left the group and went to her cabin. But hours later, she was gone, and the small dinghy, the Valiant, was also missing. Her body would be found the next morning, floating face down in the dark water, dressed in a nightgown, socks, and a down jacket. For decades, the world has debated what really happened on that yacht. Some believed it was a tragic accident, that Natalie tried to secure the dinghy after hearing it bang against the hull, slipped, and fell. Others whispered darker theories, that a violent argument turned deadly and panic followed. Captain Davern, who had remained silent for years, would later claim that the truth was far more disturbing. In interviews decades later, he said, "They were arguing. There was shouting and then nothing. Then I heard movement on the deck and silence again." Robert Wagner's version of events was different. He insisted that Natalie had gone to bed early and that when he noticed she was missing, he assumed she had taken the dinghy ashore. He radioed for help hours later, a delay that raised even more questions. When news broke that Natalie Wood had drowned, Hollywood went into collective mourning. But those closest to her couldn't accept it as a simple accident. "She was terrified of water," her sister Lana Wood said. "She wouldn't go near it in the dark, not willingly." Behind the scenes, Robert Redford was shattered. He had spoken to Natalie just weeks earlier. She told him she was planning to make changes, that she needed to step away from everything for a while. Redford later said those words haunted him. "She sounded like someone finally ready to live for herself," he recalled. In his private notes, Redford described the night of her death as the cruelest kind of irony. The woman who had feared drowning her entire life had met her end surrounded by it. He refused to speculate publicly, but to friends. He hinted that there was more to the story. Something Natalie had confided in him that made her death feel anything but accidental. Decades later, when Redford finally began to talk about that secret, he revealed that Natalie had been frightened of confronting Wagner about their future. She had told Redford, "I'm tired of pretending. I'm tired of living someone else's story." Redford believed that confrontation may have taken place that night, and that it ended in disaster. The official investigation was closed and reopened multiple times. In 2012, the coroner's report was amended, changing the cause of death from accidental drowning to drowning and other undetermined factors. The wounds on her body, bruises and abrasions, raised even more suspicion. But even as theories swirled, Robert Redford stayed mostly silent. He once said that truth has a way of surfacing when the world is ready for it. Those words would later take on haunting meaning when, near the end of his life, Redford finally broke his silence about what Natalie had told him, a confession that, if true, would change everything the world thought it knew about that night. The night on the Splendor remains one of Hollywood's most chilling mysteries. The ocean keeps its secrets well, but those who loved Natalie never stopped searching for the truth. And for Robert Redford, the weight of that truth, the secret he kept for decades, became his final burden, and his last act of loyalty to a friend he could never forget. For more than 40 years, Robert Redford carried a secret he refused to share. To the world, he was the calm, private Hollywood legend who avoided gossip and controversy. But behind that quiet demeanor, a single night and a single confession haunted him. It was Natalie Wood's voice he could never forget, the things she had told him shortly before she died. And as his own life began to draw to a close, Redford finally began to speak. Those closest to him say it started quietly. He never sought cameras or headlines. He spoke to family and a few close friends, sharing what he called the truth that never stopped echoing. In his final years, as illness began to slow him down, Redford became reflective, and when asked about Natalie Wood, he no longer deflected. She carried her fears like armor, he told one confidant. But even armor can crack. According to those who heard his story, Natalie had reached out to Redford not long before that fateful weekend in 1981. They met at a private garden restaurant in Beverly Hills, away from the public eye. Redford remembered her looking smaller than ever, beautiful but tired. She told him she was afraid. Not of drowning, not of the ocean, but of the life she was trapped in. She said she was thinking of leaving, Redford revealed. Not just her career, but her marriage. She wanted to take her daughters and start over. She was done pretending that everything was perfect. Redford recalled how her voice shook when she said that Wagner wouldn't let go easily. She said, "He doesn't get angry in public, but when it's just us, it's different." Redford wouldn't elaborate further, but those who heard him tell it said he was visibly shaken even decades later. "She was scared," he said softly. "And when someone like Natalie is scared, you listen." That meeting was the last time he saw her alive. After her death, Redford tried to dismiss what she had said, convincing himself it couldn't be connected. But the bruises, the inconsistent stories, the silence that followed, all of it weighed on him. "It never sat right with me," he told a friend. "Accidents happen, but Natalie's death didn't feel like one. He never accused anyone directly. That wasn't his way. But he hinted that Natalie's final hours were filled with confrontation and fear. He believed she had finally decided to tell Wagner the truth about leaving him. If that was what happened, Redford said, then that night was her breaking point. In his final months, Redford recorded a series of private reflections for his family, not interviews, not memoir material, but personal letters read aloud and saved on tape. In one of those recordings, he spoke about Natalie. The words were quiet, deliberate, and deeply human. "I kept her secret because I thought I was protecting her," he said. "But all I did was protect the silence that swallowed her. She deserved peace, not mystery. And the truth is, she didn't fall into that water because she was careless. She fell because she was running from something." The meaning of those words shook those who heard them. Redford didn't give names. He didn't accuse. But his tone left little doubt that he believed. Natalie's death was the tragic end of a storm she had long feared would come. Those close to Redford said that sharing the truth gave him a strange kind of relief, but also sorrow. "He cried when he spoke about her," one friend said. "Not because of guilt, but because he wished he had done more. He said he should have told someone what she confided in him." When Redford passed away, his family honored his wishes and shared excerpts from his reflections privately. The tapes, according to sources, are now sealed in the family archives. But the details that surfaced confirmed what many had long suspected. that Natalie Wood's final days were marked by fear, confrontation, and the desperate hope of freedom. For Redford, that revelation was never meant to accuse. It was meant to release, to lift the burden he had carried in silence for 4 decades. In one of his final public appearances, when asked about the cost of fame, he said something that, in hindsight, seemed to refer to her. Sometimes the world builds you up so high that when you fall, no one looks down. They just keep watching. It was his quiet eulogy for a woman he once called the most honest heart in a dishonest town. With his final words, Robert Redford didn't solve the mystery of Natalie Wood's death, but he revealed the heartbreak behind it. He didn't expose a killer. He exposed the truth that fame, love, and fear can destroy even the brightest stars when the world refuses to see their pain.